SQOLOGY Podcast. Many thanks to Resonix Sound Solutions for making this podcast a reality. There's a link in the show notes, but you can find out more about Resonix sound treatments along with tons of other info, resources, and products at resonixsoundsolutions.com. So, recap on Aggieland, some catch up there. If you want, we can delve into some current news since it's kind of coming to fruition now. Kind of both sides of it as far as how the changes with jail have affected you, if they have at all, from a shop level.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't really made much of an impact, for us at a store level, honestly. I mean, customers don't really know that anything has changed. It's not like people are asking for it less or anything like that.
Right.
We had to basically re-sign dealer agreements because it's under a new brand now or whatever. So, I mean, aside from that, not much has changed. We're watching kind of the migration of the website stuff now.
Yeah.
So I think they'll make it probably easier to order things, straight from the website, and maybe make payments to our account from the website and stuff like that. That'd be actually really nice to see.
Yeah.
As a change.
Yeah. Well, I noticed like today, and we're recording this on the 24th of April, but like today, you search for jail audio and nothing comes up.
Yeah.
It comes up Garmin, the Facebook page and everything is Garmin audio now, home of jail audio.
Yeah.
And then the website itself, jailaudio.com, just basically forwards to Garmin/jail audio, and then you kind of go from there on picking what you want, which it seems kind of like they just kind of threw all the products in there and went, here's that stuff.
Yeah. And I guarantee there's going to be some pushback from people and dealers and stuff like that. So, the future will, tell, what comes of this. But,
Sure.
in the short term, really nothing much has changed for us, as far as customer and store level stuff. But we'll see how it goes.
For sure. Obviously, I've kind of been through this in my own perspective as far as, a beloved brand going through a transition of being owned by a different company and everything. And, so I've been on both sides of that and within it.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a lot of people upset at Garmin, but at the same time, it's like it's jail's the one who let go. The people who were in control of that, it's kind of up to Garmin to do, they don't really owe anything to anybody as far as that goes going forward. I understand the sentiment. Don't get me wrong. It's just that, Garmin, their numbers start with a B. The entire car audio industry can fit into one of their industries alone from a number standpoint. You know what I mean?
That's something that a lot of people, maybe don't understand, or, they're just not seeing the bigger picture of it. So I'm sure everybody freaks out when change happens. And
absolutely.
This always happens. And, maybe it will be bad. I don't know. But I mean, right now it seems like the same.
Is what it is.
Yeah. There's some weirdness, that they're getting rid of their sales reps and stuff like that.
Right.
Which I'm sure they have their own, but there's not a lot of communication to the dealers of what the future looks like, other than, in 6 months when they made that announcement that, our rep will not be our rep anymore. So, So who knows what that's going to look like after the fact, but right now it's kind of the same as it always been.
Right. At a certain level, especially when you have a company that size and that much finances going, they're looking at the amount of time going into something versus the dollars coming back as much as anything. Like just managing a rep team, doing all those things kind of to a certain degree takes more time than it's worth from an efficiency standpoint. I'm not vouching for it being right or wrong. I'm just saying from their point of view, it's like, why is all this effort going to this when we don't need to?
Right. Yeah.
And especially if they're just saying, hey, we already have the system set up where the dealers can just come in here, like what you were saying before, like you just log into your portal, you order what you want, you get it, like case closed. Why do we need somebody taking, taking an order at this point, if somebody doesn't know who JL Audio is at this point, it's not going to get better.
Yeah. And that's, and we like some of the companies that we deal with that have, that nice web portal to where we can go in, look and see if something's in stock and order it, see which warehouse it's coming from. And then we kind of know when it's going to arrive, and we can kind of plan installation, stuff like that accordingly. So I think it'll be kind of a benefit, but right now there's going to be some bumps in the road as we get there.
Absolutely. No, I was just curious on that because it's like I said, it's kind of fresh happening right now, and I know there's a lot of people on the enthusiast level that are kind of, the sky is falling, and it.
Oh yeah.
At the end of the day, it doesn't change the products. Like, and most of the people, again, I'm being pragmatic about this, but most of those people who are going to be the vocal, I guess the minority, but the vocal ones aren't necessarily the ones buying the product today. It's like, it's not like, oh, well, I was going to buy a 3-way C7 kit, but now that this is happening, now I'm not going to. Like,
right. Yeah, the customers, they don't know any different, honestly, and they know that the product's good. It's still good. It's made in the same place. Nothing really changed as far as that goes.
Right. The product hasn't changed.
So they don't care, for the most part.
Well, and most shops now, yourself included, and most any shop that is modernized over the past decade, I would say, they're not there selling their brands as far as the brands they carry. They're selling themselves as a brand, as the expert. You come to me and then we discuss it and what fits best within your budget. If somebody is coming there already with a idea of what they want, sure, but that doesn't mean that they're going to buy or not buy or do a system or not do a system based on that alone, especially once they're able to discuss that with you.
Yeah.
So it's like the people, it's I would far rather the product, especially an a la carte product like most of JL, like hybrid for me, like, and others, like it's far more effective for it to go through somebody who's standing there face to face with the person, can see the vehicle, walk them through that and everything else, versus, somebody just outright buying a set of speakers from me and then going, what, these threes don't play down to 80 hertz?
Oh yeah.
What?
We get some crazy stuff, man. We had a guy, we put some inexpensive speakers in his, it was a Ford Escort, kind of an older Ford Escort.
Yeah.
So they were 5x7s, and we put some, inexpensive coax because he didn't want to spend a lot of money at the time. So, and he's got, stock head unit and all this kind of stuff, but his speakers were blown up. So anyway, we switched speakers, and then he calls back and makes another appointment. He said he got some different speakers because he didn't really like the way those sounded and he wanted something better. I was like, okay. So he shows back up, a week later, and he's got 2 Focal Utopia 8s. And I'm like, well, these don't really fit. And you're going to power these off the factory head unit? I mean, this is not going to sound better,
Right.
Like, it's not a full range speaker,
Right.
So that was a bizarre case. I'm like, who sold you these? Like, we're a Focal dealer. Like, how did this happen? And it was a Crutchfield deal. You know what I mean? He talked to somebody in Crutchfield. And
yeah.
I don't know what buzzwords he used to arrive at $1,000 mid base as the right
off of the factory head unit.
Yeah. I don't know how that happened, but
what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, and so he was there, and he wanted like $65 speaker replacement, and I'm like, wait a minute, these don't fit, so it's obviously not going to be $65. And number 2, this is not going to sound any better. You're not going to hear anything above, like 500 hertz or something,
Yeah, 1,000 you're lucky, right?
Yeah, I mean, like from the passenger side, yeah, you'll get up to about 1,000. On driver's side, it'll fall off real fast.
Beaming off an 8-inch in the door is excessive.
Yeah. So that was one of those things. You're like, people, if left to their own devices, will buy some weird stuff. So yeah, you got to lean on your dealer, to be your helpful friend or your expert.
Right. Which hopefully they are. I mean, obviously, in your guys' case, it's a safe bet. Not all dealers are a safe bet, but I would say that even the ones who may not be experts in tuning or know everything about everything, like they're still probably going to have a better success rate than most people just on their own
Oh
trying
yeah,
to put pieces together.
yeah, because they've done it a lot of times already.
Right, right. And they may be going by feel at that point. They may not know the reasons they're doing it, but they know that they've done this right enough times that people haven't come back every time, so they're safe.
Yeah, exactly. Most of them kind of steer you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean that's the part where hopefully at least they keep the like jail and instance, they keep the higher end stuff going, they keep the like the Max Tune program going, they keep
Yeah.
it at least something with the dealers, even if it's streamlined, whatever else. Obviously there's it's not as big of a portion of the dollars for Garmin, and that's the other thing is like Garmin didn't buy JL for the car audio nerd stuff that that segment of people want. And even within the product segment, I would say that the people who are kind of most upset about it use the least amount of the products that even JL offers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a pretty tight niche. But JL has also for as they're one of the longest lasting high-end companies out there that haven't gone by the wayside, like PPI or Orion or MB Court or any of those brands who are a shell of what they used to be. And I think that's the fear, right? Like when is JL going to end up that shell?
Well, like it's not like they sold to a known inexpensive entry level brand or something like that.
Right.
It's kind of a different case.
Yes.
And I understand the worry about it, and as long as JL doesn't alienate and ostracize their dealer network, I
Right.
think that things will still be good.
Yep. Exactly. Nope. I agree. So yeah, we'll hope. I mean, I think it'll be interesting to watch just because it is such a big thing owned by such a big thing. Like there's lots of
Oh,
there's
and
lots of
it's
decisions to be made there.
yeah, and it's so beloved. Like it's
Right.
a brand, and like you said, so many of the brands that we grew up with through the big time of car audio, the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s. There's so few of those that are kind of the same company as they were then. And
Right.
JL's one of those. And so, yeah, everybody has a fear, of being the next one. But, I think they're in pretty good hands. So only time will tell.
Yep. We'll see. What we're really here to talk about, I guess, to a certain degree, is kind of wrap up on Aggieland 11.
Yeah.
This was, I guess, your second time really judging one of these events between SV. You judged SVR last year, right? And
Yeah.
then Aggieland, and then you're judging SVR again this year.
Yeah.
Last year, you competed at Aggieland. I think you were,
Yeah.
like 8th place, somewhere in there, top 10 somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I was in the top 10, but kind of barely, you know what I mean?
Which, I mean, not bad for slapped up their speakers.
Right. Yeah.
But I think last year we had a few more cars last year actually because we had some attrition this year. But I mean, last year I think we had 47 cars,
Yeah.
and then this year we had like 41 that actually ended up competing. And part of that was we lost a few people with things being weird at the southern border. Obviously, we have a fair amount of people
Oh,
that come in from Mexico for this.
right.
So the few people who did make it from Mexico, they spent something like 5 hours getting across the line, and then they didn't get in till quite late on Friday. So it was kind of luck that they got in at all. And then actually, when they did get in, I got messages like around 2:33 a.m. Saturday morning that whoever had booked their hotel had booked it for July instead of April. So
Wow.
it was, and unfortunately, the way that everybody's schedule happens, it's difficult to make sure of there's no other conflicts. But during the same weekend was Parents' Weekend for the university there. And so, like, basically every hotel was booked up for Friday night in particular, because there was also something else going on. I forget what, but there was something else going on as well that had everything booked up Friday. So they didn't find out until like early morning that they didn't have a hotel, and then they having to drive like 2 hours to find a hotel.
Dang.
So they basically didn't sleep at all Friday night.
That's brutal.
Yeah, but they still made it. So I mean, they're when it comes to excuses, there's only so many that I think can say they came from Mexico, got their cars torn apart at the border for 5 hours because they literally, like, because they had the red Audi. Mario had a BMW, was bringing it over a BMW M4, and they pulled apart both vehicles coming across the border. And actually, I think broke a panel or two on the BMW. So they're like, well, if there's any vibrations in it when you listen to it, it's probably because, Border Patrol tore apart the panels.
Jeez.
Anyway, so yeah. So we ended up with 41 cars, which is great. I mean, Aggieland used to be, 25, 28, 30 cars. So having 40 plus still is really good turnout. Still, obviously, plenty of work. We had 8 sound quality judges that judged every single car. And then actually every car was judged for Emma install as well. So I thought that was pretty interesting. What was your perspective from a judging standpoint this year versus competition point last year?
I was definitely more busy.
A lot more going on.
Oh man, yeah, it was action packed from the judge's perspective, And I'd already done some judging before, so I kind of understood a little bit about what the judges go through. But I mean, it's not an easy task to judge that many vehicles and try to be consistent and on pace with the time frame that you've got, and then try to give some sort of feedback to the competitors, because that's what they want. They want to hear your evaluation in words, not just look at the numbers on the sheet. And we were still able to give, a little bit of feedback, just not super detailed because of the time crunch. But, I thought it was really good. The thing that helped us out be more efficient this time was the score sheet going through its newest iteration helps out, with the definitions built into the sheet and stuff like that, helps make it go a little bit quicker as far as picking a number while you're listening, and then having the same tracks that I'm used to judging with ECA normally helped me quite a lot. So those kinds of things kind of helped it to where it wasn't a huge change other than just more cars.
Yeah, because you've been judging regularly, especially under that format. So yeah, that was all pretty old hat for you by that point. So it wasn't that big deal. Anything stand out to you in any way, shape, or form, people wise, or just anything?
Yeah, I mean, like it was cool to see how many judges kind of agree. Later after the dust has settled, how many agreed. Which cars sounded good and stuff like that. So that was kind of cool to see. And then always trying to use your ears in the sheet, not really your eyes, because there were some cars that had some unorthodox speaker mountings and stuff like that. And when
I'm not even sure whose it was, but I saw some pictures of some mid ranges that were upside down in the dash. They took your slaps and mid ranges in the dash to a whole new level.
Oh man. And it sounded good, but when you first see it, you're like, what?
You're like, no.
Yeah. Like, wow, I've never considered that, and but when you listen to it, I was like, okay, I mean, it does sound good, so that's always a thing that I think newer judges, although we didn't really have any newer judges at this contest, but newer judges kind of have a hard time with is hearing around what you see,
Right.
Because that's kind of a tricky thing.
Well, that was and I'll get into some of the feedback here in a minute, but it's kind of the concept here was similar to what, and the events that we did at Hybrid back in the day, where we had an overall outcome, we didn't have a separate money round. It was basically the orgs with their judges on their score sheet with their music, and then we weighted those scores kind of like what we did here, and then pulled those together. And in my experience, now it was fewer cars, so you have to take that into account too. It was 28 to 32 cars versus 40 plus. But it typically, especially when you had more judges, like in that case we had 8 to 10, and then Aggieland this past weekend, we had 8. From my perspective, because some of the feedback was leave the money round to money round, leave the orgs to orgs. From my perspective, like these are all essentially org level judges and money round judges. We just kind of put them on different score sheets. What I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
When you pull it together, and it's easy. The downside of that is that then you have more results and standings and this and that again to kind of your brain starts going down the data rabbit hole, and it's like, well, if I pulled this out and I pulled that out, then I would have been in this place instead of that place.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
It's easy to favor, and of course what that means is somebody else would go down in place, and so then they would be playing the same game from another perspective. Like,
Oh, absolutely.
it's going to shuffle around no matter what, but the more judges you have that are experienced on score sheets and music that they know, based on our experience with this over the years, you put that together and it kind of damps everybody out to a certain extent, because some judges, when they hear something they like, they'll get a little more excited, and that might translate into almost bonus points on the score sheet.
Right. Yeah.
Or you might have somebody, a flip side, and it could be the same car where another judge is disappointed in what they hear and what they're listening for, and it almost gets penalized to a certain degree. But typically, when you even it out, those judges counter each other to the point where, again, the best floats to the top as a outcome, mathematical outcome, not just based on a couple outlier opinions. And
Yeah.
it's easy to say, well, this judge was overly, if you look at things and you go, well, this judge was overly critical of my vehicle and I feel like they scored it too low. It's easy to take, and this could be the same vehicle, and I've seen it repeatedly, has been the same vehicle where one judge might be overly critical of it, and you go, well, if I take that judge out, then I would have placed XYZ. But then you're not looking at the judge over here that was maybe overly favorable of your car. And so, and that's where
Right.
we kind of got the Olympic round, judging back in the day, where they would drop high and low score. And, so you kind of would take those outliers out of it. I don't like doing that, just because it's like, well, everybody's opinion matters,
Right.
at this level. Like, why have the judging if you're just going to throw a third of it out?
Yeah. Yeah. That makes no sense. Well, and with that weird slant is you'll get a lot of people that they'll start getting their favorite or least favorite organization out of it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Be like, well, I did awesome in this one, and this one, I
Right.
placed last, and so this one sucks, and
Right.
this one's the best, and you're like, man, it's not really like that.
Right.
It's
And
just
and
different stuff.
and some people, I mean, to a certain degree, some of that is the competitor base, especially if you have certain tuners, they're doing a lot of the vehicles and they're good at an organization. We've seen this over and over in the past, whether it be Mecca or Iasca or what have you.
Yeah,
And you can take, like, back in the Team Hybrids day, for example, you had Scott Welch, you had not well, yeah, Scott Welch, Scott Bawalda, Scott Welch, Fred Lynch. You had some key tuners who really could do well at Iasca. On the Mecca side, you had Steve Cook, you had Hogan,
yeah,
you had those several really had that side figured out, and they didn't always cross over very well because levels are different, the source material is different, the judges they know is different, so
right,
uh,
yeah,
I think there is, to a certain degree, it's like, hey, I really like how my car sounds this way and it does well in this organization. It doesn't do well in that organization. And for some, it's just not worth playing the game. It's like, I don't want to play the game.
right. And it's not to to say that these opinions don't matter. You know what I mean? Pick the ones you like and compete in what you like. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nobody's twisting your arm saying you got to do everything.
Right. But I would argue at a money round, or an invitation like this at this level, that's where kind of all bets are off, and you're really going for the best of the best, however it takes to get there, and
Absolutely.
shaking that out however it needs to, because your car has been there and it has not been there, both. But typically, if your stuff's together, you're going to rise to the top with everybody to a certain degree.
Yeah.
And mathematically, you might have a judge or two that might swing that one way or another, either getting, like in the case of Aggieland, we had spoiler alert, everybody knows, but Brian Gill was second and Mark Bruno was first, and they were practically a tie.
Yeah.
Brian Gill was 166.35 versus Mark Bruno was 166.43. So the difference was like 0.08 points. Like it was one judge changes their score by like a point and it flip flops.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's not, and that was one of the things that took time in the end, as far as just making sure that was all correct, because I didn't want to have to come back and say, oh nope, sorry, we did a math problem and this person wins. And the other part of that was like, if you look at things from a awards standpoint, and you just looked at, if you just looked at Brian Gill's awards versus Mark Bruno's awards, you would say Brian Gill wins.
Yep.
He got first place in all his areas. Mark Bruno got first, second, and third. So Mark Bruno didn't actually win everything that he was in. But if you look at from another angle, if you look at from, if those two were just the only cars in existence, and the judges were, picking it from an elimination standpoint of, I picked that one for first place, I picked that one for second place, I think 5 of the 8 judges all said Mark Bruno wins, as far as first place versus second place. From there, from a mathematical standpoint, it really comes down to the swings between the judges. And again, there was a couple judges who were really excited about Brian Gill's car that kind of got him that close to begin with. And then, there was 1 or 2 judges that just happened to have enough of a swing between those two that, took Mark Bruno over the top. But again, from a practical standpoint, it was like, man, either one, this was their weekend together.
Yeah. It was a tough call between the two.
I mean, what was it about? Let's just pick Mark Bruno's car. I mean, what was it from a listening standpoint? What was it that you would say helped get him there in terms of presentation of the vehicle?
It just didn't have many flaws at all, and sadly for me, music has been relegated to listening to flaws, which is
pointing out the problems versus listening to what's exciting.
Yeah. And I don't enjoy music as much as I used to, but anyway, so his didn't really have hardly any flaws at all. The only one that I really picked out and I told him about was when you play Put On, like the lowest bass note was noticeably louder than the other ones. But that was kind of like the only thing I could really pick on. The image focus was really good. The placement was good. It had pretty decent layering. The room size scaled pretty good, as you went to larger and smaller recordings and stuff like that. And tonally wise, it just really, other than that one note was kind of louder, it really didn't have any flaws. It really sounded, kind of what I wanted. So, moving between that to like Brian's had a lot of the same characteristics, and I thought his bass was like a touch more even, but the top end was like a little more exaggerated. You know what I mean? So, so both of them kind of lost like a couple points in tonal aspects and different parts. But, I think image placement and focus, I think, probably helped push him over the top for my sheets.
I got you.
Is going to be my guess without looking back at line
No,
by line.
it wasn't necessarily a statistical question, just more of,
Yeah.
what you heard out of it that day that,
Yeah, and they're 2 different styles, you know what I mean? So, like, Mark's, you sit much closer to the speakers and stuff. Not to say that you're, like, on top of it or anything, but so the presentation seems closer to you, you know?
Mhm.
Whereas Brian's, you sit really far back, and you get, um, uh, kind of a couple rows further back in the audience kind of a thing,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's not really how we judge, distance to stage or anything like that because it's kind of based on the car, not really where you sit in the car.
Right.
But, traditionally, Brian's had sounded like a little bit more like closed and more narrow, like you're looking down a tunnel.
Right,
But
right.
but he had made like these little things that go on the sides beside where your ears are, like these reflectors that help the image width and ambience a little bit.
Okay,
So
interesting.
his was better than last time I heard it at finals, and I was kind of shocked by that. When I was like, "Wow, that really actually made a difference." Like, not like a huge difference, but it definitely sounded, bigger. So I was like, "Well, good job." Um, but it's still not perfect, and none of them are,
Right.
But so that's kind of like a big, like, the overview difference between their vehicles is kind of like how far back where the sound starts from your seated position.
Right.
Mark's sounded, because of that. I think it was easier to pick, isolate different parts from side to side. Like
Mhm.
between the singer to like an instrument and like left center or something like that. But with Brian's, because it's further back, those seem closer together, but they're probably not if you were sitting closer to the steering wheel like you do in Mark's vehicle.
Right.
But it's just harder to hear that separation and definition because you're sitting a little bit further back. And so I think that's probably why it worked out that way on my sheets, just as a scientific standpoint. But
Right, right. But and you had Mark Bruno, first, Mark Bruno, Brian Gill second, but I mean they were a point and a half apart.
yeah,
And you had Jeffrey a half point off of Mark Bruno. You had Brian Mitchell within a half point. So I mean, it seems like all those top 4 vehicles everybody was pretty much in agreement that all 4 of those vehicles were pretty dang good.
yeah. Jeffries, he'd really made a pretty significant improvement from the time I heard it. I guess about a month before in Frisco. When we had heard it there, and not that I was trying to compare one to the last time, but I know that this score was probably better because the parts that I had given him feedback on to improve on, he had definitely worked on a couple of those. So I know his score was definitely better than the previous time, and it was really impressive.
Very cool. So I actually kind of went through and put together a little bit of a exit survey, and pretty much everybody participated in that.
Oh, cool.
Partially because I kind of made them do that before I put them on the list for next year.
That's genius.
So I'm not sure how many shows you've been to in your life that kind of force you to give you feedback on an event before you can compete again. But here we are.
I've never
Um,
heard of that, but that's a genius move.
so so we actually had over 40 responses, so pretty much close to 100% in terms of numbers. uh Basically kind of breaking down some of the because naturally I'm the number stats guy, so
Yeah.
but like 97% said they'd recommend Aggieland again. It
Excellent.
was like 4.51 out of 5 was the average judging satisfaction. So, and
Okay.
well over half gave it a perfect 5. And there was the concerns that were flagged that didn't get a perfect 5 when it came to the judging outcome and satisfaction was more administrative event related. So more in my lands in my lap more than the judges themselves. So partly due with, clarity as far as kind of what was included, what wasn't.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, because initially we gone in saying that, it was, ex judges plus Emma.
Oh, right.
And then we kind of sort of vaguely on purpose said that we were going to include Ayaska because everybody kind of agreed on that. And then we had some changes with the venue because we couldn't kind of judge everything at the same time. So I kind of broke that off again because there were mainly around Ayaska, and there was a couple people who either did not have a class to compete in with Ayaska at this level because they're in a finals only class.
Right. Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, Brian and Brian, both Brians actually.
Right.
And, some other concerns with Ayaska and this and that. So Ayaska was really kind of the outlier as far as that goes.
Okay.
So when the judging kind of broke up, I basically kind of broke it back apart because of that, because I didn't expect everybody to kind of, be on board. After that, then everybody voluntarily did Ayaska.
Oh.
Even though I didn't force them to, everybody did it. So I had score sheets for everything. And Ayaska itself didn't really change the outcome, but it did, kind of dampen things a little bit, as far as the just having more judges again helped kind of smooth things out.
Yeah.
So that was, yeah, exactly. So whether it was better for every person or not, I know it wasn't, it wasn't good for some, it was good for some others. But in the end, from a statistical standpoint, it was a better show as a result.
Yeah.
And then, of course, some with fatigue, just having that many cars with that, with the weekend, everything else. But that's pretty common with these events now. I think most of the judges know what they're doing in that regard. And there's not that, you can probably attest to this better than I can, but the amount of time that it actually takes to score the car that you're actually listening at levels isn't huge, during that time.
Right.
Especially when you're in, the first couple cars takes time. That's, getting going takes time.
Yeah.
But once you kind of have your baseline down, getting that scoring through is surprisingly quick. Either the car does it or it doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've already heard so many cars at this point, if it's going to be, in the top or the bottom half, you know what I mean? Pretty quick.
Well, and the thing is, like, okay, let's say that you went from 48 to say 32 cars. It would still take 2 days. You would still be spending the same amount of time listening to cars. You would still, it's like, you would just be kind of spreading that out a little bit more, and it seems better, but it doesn't really.
You would just
logically.
You'd listen to each car longer. But I don't think it would change the outcome.
Exactly. Yeah. It's one of those things where you might have a little more time to do this or that, but it does, does that necessarily make it a better event? Not necessarily, because you don't have as much, going into the mix. So again, from an outcome standpoint, yeah, there's more cars to quote unquote lose to.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you also are getting that much more really good data to go up against and see where you stack up and what people around you are doing and everything like that. So, that's what we, hopefully things, delve into more. So out of those, we also had kind of a comment section, basically over 30 of those, we had good comments on kind of what we did well. The kind of the theme of those was that, it was a smooth event flow, especially with having so many judges. I think this was the most, as far as for the people at this event, not from our perspective or from other events or whatever else, but for those who are accustomed to just competing at Aggieland, this was more judges than they're used to. So we had 8 judges,
right.
Which compared to, as far as announced judges from, SVR, we essentially had 3 judges at SVR last year because of everything falling apart the way it did, to 8 judges here. So, if you went from competing at SVR to competing at Aggieland, just those were your only 2 events, even though they're essentially peers, it would seem very different, going from one to the other. A lot of people said there was, actually clearer and more consistent communication than in prior years. So, I think part of that was probably people paying attention better. It's like, and people like the layout, the location, the scheduling. The people were very big on the money round format, it being its thing that is widely respected, that it defines what Aggieland is. And there was a lot of people really diving into wanting more of the money round, essentially. There was also, as far as standout mentions, ironically, Teresa Bruno and Mark Bruno, who are spouses, obviously. But beyond the judging team, of course, that had a lot of shout outs, but I mean, those two in particular, there was a lot of people who were congratulating Mark on the win, and also separately thanking Teresa for all of her efforts, because she kind of voluntarily dove in and handled a lot of hospitality stuff during the weekend, like setting up the barbecue for lunch and making sure drinks were all cold and here and there, and getting stuff for the judges. And I mean, she just really went above and beyond what she normally does, but she normally doesn't get credit for it. So I'm just going to shout her out now and say, hey, she's getting credit for it.
Yeah. She was a tremendous help. It was awesome to see.
So, but specific quotes where the judging flow went really smooth for as many judges as there were. Everything went well. Seeing Mark Bruno win, he works hard on this vehicle and deserves it, which he has been, I'd say over the past year, it's kind of become more old hat that he's winning, but not a lot of people knew who he was a few years ago, and he's been around a long time. So
right. Yeah.
It's cool to see. And we are lining up to have a separate interview with him alone and kind of go through. He's been in the industry a very long time, back to, if you guys remember, Fujitsu 10 and Eclipse and all that. He was one of the key players in that back in the day. So yeah, he's been in this industry neck deep in it for a very long time. He's by no means new to it, even if we're just kind of finding out about him on the East Coast. But
right.
There was about as many critical comments as there were good comments, which is what I was going for, honestly. It's one of those things where I kind of announced that this year was my last big show. As far as me taking it on alone myself, everything else, and especially taking on any other shows, especially at this size or money rounds or anything else, is like, I'm done. I can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
But with that, I was able to kind of get some emotional separation from it. So it was kind of like, hey, bring it on.
Yeah.
Whatever's right, whatever's wrong, it doesn't matter to me anymore. Just, hey, let's just find that way. I wanted to be able to pass it on because I knew it wasn't going to end, so it's like, let's make this a clean cut to where we can do better going forward and what the people really want from this event. Because, at the end of the day, it's about the people who are participating in the event, the competitors and the judges and everybody else. It's not about trying to be fancy. So
yeah, well, I mean, without the people, it's not an event, is it?
Exactly. Yeah, otherwise it's just me and Chris Pate hanging out and having barbecue, which is fine. I'm cool with it. If that's what it is, that's fine. I'm cool with that. But yeah, it's a lot of effort getting everybody there and a lot of money and everything else. But yeah, so a lot of people, I would say the majority of people, were not happy about how late it went on Sunday, which I agree. The thing is I think we were done by 6:30 or so, maybe 7.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit, somewhere in there, which for most events, like, you don't go to finals and expect to be out much before that. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think it's been the last few years we've been ahead of schedule and we've gotten out earlier. So people have gotten used to being out by 3:30, 4 o'clock at the latest. This one went a little bit later. There's a few reasons for that. One, typically we get an extra round in on Saturday afternoon, which gets us ahead of schedule by one round on Sunday.
Right.
That's never how it's scheduled, but that's almost always how it ends up. This year, we had one vehicle that was not quite running right on Saturday afternoon, on the final round of Saturday afternoon, and that kind of threw us back almost a full group because Jeff was working on that vehicle. So then he went to have to go judge the other vehicles in that same group that the other judges had already done. And then those judges had to do that one vehicle and wrap it up.
Yeah.
So essentially that kind of threw us out one full group, plus one competitor who ended up not being there anyway Sunday morning, but he wasn't there to be judged Saturday afternoon, which wasn't on him. That wasn't a penalty. It was like, it wasn't scheduled for then. So I understand. But we probably would have figured out if we had been up to speed with the group before, then we probably would have figured out a way to go ahead and get that next group done Saturday, afternoon, because I think we were wrapped up at like 2:30 or so on Saturday.
Yeah.
So we've had plenty of time to get our group done, which would have put us ahead around 3 hours, and some other stuff would have been able to get done too, because we wouldn't have run so late Saturday night with some other stuff because of throwing Jeff back. So had things gone as they normally do, and everybody had been ready with working vehicles, and if everything had gone perfectly, which it never does, which is why I don't plan on it, but if everything had gone the way it normally does, we would have been done on time.
Yeah.
Also, we had 8 judges versus 6, and going into the money round.
When you say on time, there's not a finish. There's not a time where it's in on the schedule. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, on time versus expectations.
You're right. Yeah. Like that. Like we were done on Sunday. I mean, we still got done on time.
Right. This wasn't Mecha Finals 1:30 in the morning on Monday morning. Like we got done on Sunday. That's good enough. Right?
Yeah, and it was still daylight. Like
right. Yeah, it was by no means late. It was a normal. Like I said, it was a normal show ending. It was just that we weren't as far ahead as we normally are. So
I accept that.
That was it was more of an expectation from people going, well, every other year we're out of here by 3:30, 4 o'clock, and this year we weren't.
We had a couple hiccups. Sorry about
it. Exactly, but
what else did we do wrong?
Anyway, also with that, in terms of score sheets and then them going into it, because again, the goal here was to have the best possible outcome, with the money round, right? So, but we had, we had around 375 score sheets altogether.
Holy moly.
Going into it.
Yeah, because the installs.
Yeah. So that was another, 40 or so. Versus including install score sheets, if you go from finals, finals last year, for the finals events, not including the kickoff events, but for finals itself, for all 4 organizations, so, Mecha with their 3 judges, plus IASCA, plus Emma, plus Mask, and you include all their install score sheets as well, which like their, Emma judges all their install at finals. And so if you combine all 4 orgs with all their score sheets for the sound quality and install, they had like 345 score sheets. So they had, finals, all the cars combined had fewer score sheets than Aggieland. So when you think it through, like, these are not small events when it comes to what's going into it. It's just that it typically goes smooth enough to where you just don't think about it,
Yeah.
Again, clarity on the money round scoring calculation as far as how that's
including
being done.
Orgs. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Again, judge load management, concern of the long session and fatigue for the judges, which again, it's par for the course for this. I think everybody's, pretty much knows what they're doing.
Well, I mean, what would you do? Build in more breaks? You want it to go longer? Like, make up your mind.
Right. And then if you do fewer cars, then people are like, well, but we have all this extra time now. We could have had more cars. Like,
yeah.
Some of the cars that had to be judged outdoors, which again, it kind of was what it was.
Yeah, I mean, that's legitimate. I get that.
And then people not wanting the orgs combined with the outcome, essentially. So, going into next year, kind of already made the announcements, but we're essentially making it to where there's no confusion about the organizations. We're just taking the organizations out of it altogether.
Yeah.
So it's going to be money round only. That gives us, 6 judges. And so this is part of it too, right? Like when you do the money round, flip flop it. You're going to finals, right? And let's say you compete in everything at finals. So you're competing in IASCA, you're competing in Mecha, you're competing in Mask, you're competing in, IASCA, everything. How many of those people who are doing all that are then going, hey, you know what we should do? A money round at finals.
Let's also judge it again
with 6 more judges. Yeah. That's what we need. But that's what you're asking for when you turn around now at these bigger shows. Like, okay, you're already getting 6 judges. You're having all this, and most people don't want an elimination round, or they would just want to know they're signed up to do the money round, and they're there to do that, and let's go.
Yeah.
Then they also want the orgs there because, well, I'm spending all this money, I'm going to the place, I'm doing the thing, so I want to get my points for finals too. That's really what it comes down to, you know. But the problem with that is time. Also, there's only so many judges at that level who can all be at the same place at the same time.
And is willing to judge over 40 cars in a weekend.
Right. So you're almost, no matter what, and I don't mean this in any which way to anybody, but you're almost always compromised on your judging at that point, because there's not 20 judges to pick from at that level who can all be there at the same place at the same time again.
Yeah, scheduling conflicts, for everybody,
This way, just doing it, just the money round, no orgs, now we can just pick 6 judges who make a good mix. Again, it's not about good versus bad judge. It's like you kind of are building it together as a whole to say, hey, this is a complete score sheet with these 6 judges.
Right.
So then there's one judging team, one outcome. That's the other part of it. Then you're not sitting there going, well, I got a first in this, but I got a third in that, and I got a first. It's like it's all different criteria. You're going to have a different thing. The concept with having the original concept this year with Aggieland, with having it the money round plus Emma, was because there's a lot of technical aspects to Emma that aren't necessarily in the money round format.
Right.
So it would kind of get a more complete outlook, and that was the idea, was that the cars that do well with the money round, there's also that bonus where if they also do everything technically really well in Emma, then they're going to come up a little bit. If they don't, then they're going to drop down a little bit. That was the idea. That was on purpose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Another part of it is there was, this year we had a couple first timers, 3 in fact. Brim Johnson, who was essentially sponsored by John Centers of Genesis Audio, and this was Brim's first SQ event ever.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, and again, thanks to John Centers, that was his idea, concept, ticket, everything to make that make that idea come about, to where it was essentially a feedback. The idea wasn't to be about placements or outcome or anything else. It was just, hey, get some feedback from world-class judges, experience the event, be part of it, and, essentially not be out anything, financially. There was a couple others, Patrick Prine, who's a buddy of Drew Jones. And so Patrick, it was his first sound quality event. And then I believe we had one other who, there was basically 3 people who was their first like big event like this. So that was pretty cool to see. But with that, so next year, essentially the first round, I'm going to have 4 of those, kind of first timer feedback only vehicles.
Yeah.
And that will be the first round. So that way it kind of gives the judges a chance to warm up, gives a little space in case, somebody's dragging in a little bit late, anything else.
Yeah.
Where, it's not as
hiccup.
Yep. So that way, and those first four, they're there for the experience, for the feedback, for everything else to kind of warm up for next year. Last year, Trey Thompson, it was his first event. And that was his kind of thing too, was, kind of what happened to him. And then this year was his second year, and then he was able to participate more and everything. But, that way, from an event standpoint, for the diehard competitors, nobody's really having to go first.
Yeah.
And then,
man, that's one hell of a contest to pick to be your first one.
Right, exactly, right? Like,
wow.
So we're going to essentially have four of those cars on purpose next year that are feedback only.
Cool.
Not having part of the outcome, but being there to basically get the judges warmed up in that. And then we're not picking a quote unquote reference vehicle or
right.
throwing judges' cars through there or affecting the outcome in any other way. This is the most supportive and random way I could really think of to make it to where there's kind of a way for calibration and warm up without it having favorites to anybody.
Sure. Yeah. Or penalizing anyone,
yeah, exactly.
To go first or whatever.
And from there, I mean, we've had, if it's done right, especially in this case with it being as tight as it is and everything. I mean, we've had, I think a lot of people overthink, that the winners the last couple of years anyway at Aggieland have been in the last round. A lot of that is preparation on their part.
Well, yeah. I mean, because I think you get like some sort of if you've done it before, or however many times, you get some kind of preference as to when you go and got stuff like that.
Well, yeah, in the past, it's been mostly kind of whoever jumps the quickest and then gets their
Yeah.
place picked out and everything was kind of the, kind of got their pick, and then a lot of people just haven't really given it much thought. I think people are just now overthinking it because we've had plenty of events before where things were completely randomized, and I think the last year we had like the Parkinson's, research event in Georgia. Wallace Whitworth won it, and he was one of the first cars on Saturday.
Yeah.
You could randomize this, and the outcome will be very similar. It just happens that people are on their prepared end. So yeah, this year I've kind of staggered it to where there's groups to where it gives the people who have been the most loyal to the event over the years, who have their stripes. It gives them an opportunity to kind of jump in and secure a spot and some some level of favor in terms of the groupings, but we're talking like 3 through 8. We're not talking like, oh, everybody will get this group. It'll still be randomized. It'll just be at that point. And then once we have those groups filled as we go through the registration process, then the actual sorting order will be completely randomized. So that way nobody's picking their exact spot. It's just that way it's kind of like, okay, these groups get these groups, these two groups to get those groups, and then kind of let it go from there to where there's some level of control, but to where we don't want somebody who deserves to be there, essentially like finals. I mean, you earn your way to finals. It's kind of the same thing here. You kind of earn, it's an invitational. You earn your place here. It's not a right.
Right. Yeah.
But, then once you get to that point, then, there's going to be some randomizing it to where it's kind of fair on everybody. And then the other side of it is that the judges will pick their own music completely. So whatever,
Oh, interesting.
Whatever music the judges themselves want to use, they'll have their playlist. It's kind of similar rules there, though. Whatever they pick, they need to be able to give either in verbal or written formats what they're listening for from those tracks.
Sure. Yeah.
Obviously, we'll have the track lists ahead of time from each judge. The judges have already been selected. That's already out there. But that way, the judges then can be completely in tune with what they're listening to, knowing it. And also, the score sheet will be a kind of a collection of ideas from the judges as to what's on the score sheet to make sure everybody is kind of in agreement and has input on that. And then we can kind of go where we need to on that to just basically give the judges exactly what they need to do their job to their ability. From there, then with 6 judges, no install. I mean, part of that was we were having classify stuff, especially in Emma. There was a lot of extra stuff that had to happen that I think everybody involved, especially if they're going to finals this year, will be better for having done. But it took more time. So as far as that goes, I mean, getting through the amount of cars, 6 judges, no install, not really worried about classes or anything else. I as far as fixing all of those issues,
yeah,
done.
Yep. Just straight up money round. Everybody's inside. Get it done.
So on the flip side, to kind of help on the org side of it, we're going to kind of TikTok it to like we had a Aggie Light in 2022 when we didn't have an actual Aggieland, which was essentially just the orgs. And so we're going to do the same thing this year.
Okay.
September 20 at MTI, we're going to have Aggie Light 2, which is going to be Iasca Texas State Finals. It's going to also be the MCA overall finals for the MCA organization. So there'll be 4 judges there for that format. And then also Mask will be there. And I think they're bringing 2 judges. And then Emma as well.
Excellent.
All 4 orgs will be there. September 20 is essentially the last day to get Iasca points. And so it'll be also kind of a points chaser for anybody and everybody. So it's one of those things where we're kind of shifting it to where, that'll be the Aggieland organizational event. And then the April event will be just money round. So we're still doing it all, just splitting it up a little bit.
Right. Okay. I like that. And it makes it to where the Aggieland, money around big event will run, I think, smoother and everybody will understand what they're getting into ahead of time. And so expectations will be, met and tempered in the beginning,
Well, it's a lot clearer, right? Like, this is the music, these are the judges, this is the score sheet.
Yep.
That's it.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. No other curveballs. Show up and do well.
Right. Yeah, and one outcome, one thing to rule them all. And again, it's one of those things where I was projecting on, I'll admit, I was projecting on Aggieland my ideals for an event, and that's really where a lot of the stuff came from. Was like, hey, it'll be a better event if we do this. And from a statistical outcome standpoint, yes. From a competitor standpoint, understanding what's happening and why it's happening and everything else, I can understand where it gets frustrating and confusing. So it's easier just to split up. Plus, if you go back, even back to not long ago, when I was doing more of these events, really just had Iasca and Mecca to worry about. And we had very high ideals and knowns with that, with the judging, with how things were carried out, everything else. Now you've got a lot more variables on the organizational level to deal with, so that adds confusion. And yeah, it's more straightforward. And even if you go back, older people who than me who project kind of how things were done back, like in the Masters days and stuff like that. But you really just had Iasca.
Yeah.
So if you do that kind of event, then if you talk when you're bringing essentially close to 100 people together to make an event. Well, you ask any one of those, okay, so we do it that way. Which organization do you use? Every single one of them is going to have a different answer,
Oh, absolutely. When, at that time, there was only one, it was being invented as they were doing it.
Right. So so it's a different world now. I mean, it's different even from a few years ago. So yeah, I think doing it this way kind of appeases everything to a certain degree. It doesn't fix everything, but I think it's the best compromise to keep going forward and figure it out.
I agree. I think it'll be smoother, and then everybody will get out the time that they perceive as the finish line.
Right. Some special mentions from the highlights again. Teresa Bruno had multiple shout outs. And Mark Bruno again for his vehicle. Several competitors know that this was the smoothest event yet, and praised the atmosphere and flow. And that's I think one of the big things with Aggieland that is consistent as far as people enjoying themselves from an atmospheric standpoint, from just the weekend, having the barbecue there Saturday, having the awards, having everything else. Like it's a lot of fun to be there.
It is. It's still one of my favorite shows. It reminds me a lot of the hybrid show that we used to go to, and so it's got kind of the little less serious and a lot more friendly. Hang out, have a good time, have some barbecue. So more about friendship and less about who's winning this thing until Sunday.
Until everybody gets the score sheets, and then all bets are off.
Oh yeah, pitchforks and torches,
And again, one of the standout moments was with Brim Johnson being their first time competitor, basically sponsored by John Centers at Genesis Audio.
Yeah.
And I did get a quote from them. They said, I think him and his wife were there together, but it said, we enjoyed the 2-day event and learned what sound quality is all about. It was a phenomenal experience. I'd recommend to the whole world to experience SQ. You'll never go back to regular music again. And so it's getting feedback like that. It's not just about the points and trophies. We're really being there to be able to open up people's ears to something they didn't know they were missing before. So
yeah, well, I'd talked to several competitors kind of after the show, and they always like, it's the camaraderie of that show is just kind of unparalleled.
Yeah.
In this area, you know what I mean? I think that California has some shows that are kind of similar as far as that goes, but because Richard has that barbecue show that he does.
Yeah.
And so that one's a big one, and then his birthday bash one's usually kind of like that too. But they over here, SVR, it's an excellent show, but it always seems a little more serious.
Yeah, we've said this before on here, and then Chris Pate kind of gets upset. Like, we're serious too. I don't think we mean serious as in like intensity, as far as doing their best or anything like that. It's not.
No, I don't think it's
it's like more somber, more like it's just not as much of a party. You know what I mean?
Right. It's and that's not
Not a dig at SVR either. Just
right. Yeah, it's weird. It's like the competitors are out to try to win more at SVR or something, whereas Aggieland people are like, I just want to see where I fall and have a great time and all this kind of stuff. I don't know. It's just a little different.
I think they're serious about it. They're so caught up in the moment through the weekend, they don't realize how disappointed they are until they're on the drive home.
That's when the emails come.
Exactly. So of course that's when I ask everybody for their opinion, be it right when they're at their highest.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think overall, I think the theme here is both the follow up from this event and then going into next year is really trust. We ask the competitors to trust our feedback as the judges and the organizations and the event itself as far as with their vehicles, and I really wanted to do my part to give back on that, to trust them on their feedback to make the event better and take that over tradition, over what our concepts are for it, everything else, like just really, hey, and even if I would say that many of the people who gave their feedback and then they go back and go, whoa, that's not what I meant. I don't want all this. but it's like, also I think you do just give it a chance. And I think you'll understand that this is what you wanted.
Yeah. And it's, and we want to know what people want,
Absolutely.
Otherwise, how do you know you're going in the right direction?
Right. And not trying to be everything to everyone, it's like there's no sense for Aggieland to, Aggieland is a voluntary event for everybody. Like it's not a required thing. Chris is giving up a bunch of money and time to make it happen. We're all giving up a bunch of time and effort and travel and expenses and everything else. Like everybody's giving up to be part of this thing, but it's voluntary. Like it doesn't have to be anything in particular. But that's where I think whatever it takes to make the event great for the people who are there, that's the goal. So I think focusing on that core will make it stronger. That's what people all seem to be driving towards, what they want. And Aggieland doesn't have to be the biggest, but it does need to be the best for everybody who's there that weekend. It needs to be the best event in the world for that, and that's what we're after.
Well, I think it's a solid plan for next year, and I think it'll address a lot of the concerns and still support the things that people liked.
One of the things that kind of was a little bit less didn't go as planned. The Demology experiment. It was it was on the lower end of the scale in terms of priorities, and it's also pretty much, again, everybody volunteering to be involved and everything else, and not everybody ended up being there or being able to participate or whatever else. There were a couple people who did, among a few vehicles. So I essentially kind of took the scores from where we had consistency across vehicles and across the listeners or judges, if you will, who did that. It was basically a pretty simple kind of a 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, over like the engagement of host, the vehicle listening environment itself, the overall enjoyment, and then some, basics on the sound quality side. Here's a score for spatial, 1 to 5. Here's a score for spectral, tonal balance, 1 to 5. And then like listening enjoyment, 1 to 10. So the winner of that, which I'm just now announcing for the first time, but the winner of that was, for the second time, Jeffrey Howd.
Oh, nice.
Yay. But yeah, so he actually, the first Demologist award we did at Lone Star, where it was more about the quantity of, however many people you had through it. And again, there, it was a little bit difficult getting everybody to participate, but we did have everybody participating on that with him, and he won that one by pretty much a landslide, and that was kind of what got him the wild card to be able to participate in the top 20. Here it was just kind of its own thing to see what happened, but yeah, so he won. He did win that. And then the Tuner Challenge, which you were the SVR winning pair, but this year we had 4 competitors. So you had Miguel and Bree, Rios, Jeff Smith, Dylan Ray and Trey Thompson did it as a group, which this was like Trey's second Aggieland, and last year was his first real big sound quality event. So for him to be stepping up at this level is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great.
And then Joseph Norton, who unfortunately, between me and the software and a fight somewhere along with the computer, lost his tune at the WCA finals last year.
Yeah.
After he spent 90 minutes doing it. So that was frustrating for him. And then he wasn't going to be able to make it to Aggieland, and then he was, and then he kind of last minute was like, "Hey, I want to be part of the tuner challenges again." I was like, "Are you sure?" I mean, but he was very insistent on making sure that his tune got saved properly this time. So
yeah, I would imagine that would be a paramount importance.
yeah. So there's a whole lot more procedure now as far as saving the tunes to make sure that's correct going forward. Which everything was fine. Everybody's tune got saved and it was all good, and all the presets were correct. So yeah.
Excellent.
Luckily, we had lots of Helix tech support available, and same as when we use Arc. Same, had Brian. Brian is usually at these events, and this year we had Brian and Fred, and it was like, hey, if we ran into a problem somewhere, we had enough firepower to take care of it.
Oh yeah. Somebody's gonna know something.
So the vehicle was Tank Fulton's. He's fairly new. I think this was his first money run Aggieland. I think he competed in the orgs last year, but he's basically like a 2-year competitor. But he kind of came to me, and his vehicle is kind of a smorgasbord to a certain degree. It's got it's not one brand. He's got rear speakers. He's got a front sub. He's got rear subs. He's got 3-way components set up front. He's got like 2 DSP amplifiers. So like there were options. If you could tune this thing any which way you wanted with any number of things to do. So there was a lot of potentials as far as presentation and everything else, but he also was able to kind of sit with the vehicle and go through the process with everybody and make sure. I mean, he's very very good about procedures, so he was able to kind of make sure that this was all running properly in the background, because the vehicle was like 1,000 miles away from where I was at. So
right, yeah.
So luckily he was able to do that. And then Cassie Hall did the kind of proctored the judging and scoring. So kind of like what you did, Mike, at WCA finals.
Yeah.
So kind of just sitting with the judges, going through it. For those not familiar, we now use 3 judges, and then basically 2 of those 3 judges have to agree. It's a double elimination bracket race, essentially. So there's a consolation bracket, a winner's bracket, and then the tunes, basically it's tune versus tune versus tune versus tune, and then goes to consolation, and then kind of goes through there to get the bracket up to first place. So to kind of go through that, and I will make everybody who was involved aware of their color, and we'll do this kind of like SVR.
Yeah.
But the first race was red versus yellow. Yellow won, and then it was green versus blue, and blue won. Green got a consolation, but then green also got a bye at that point because we didn't have. It was essentially 6 presets, so there was no preset 7 and 8. So at that point, preset one preset versus another, there was no preset there, so it automatically won. So anyway, green got the bye, and then it was the bass tune versus red. Red won, obviously. I hope it would.
Right.
And so then it went yellow versus blue. Again, the previous round, yellow had won, blue had won. So then yellow versus blue, yellow won again. So yellow was still undefeated. And then it was green versus red. Red won. And then it was yellow versus red. Yellow won again. So still undefeated. Kind of like same as you guys. I think you were blue in the last one. So then let's see here. It was blue versus red. And then red won the constellation round, and then it was red versus yellow again, and then yellow won.
Okay.
So red was second place, yellow was first place, and yellow, I will announce that much, was Joseph Norton.
All right.
And he went completely undefeated. So
excellent job, man.
Yeah. So congratulations, Joseph. And again, especially coming in after that and then going against some actual pretty serious firepower there. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's pretty cool to see. So we have another forgot to mention as far as judges go. It was Chris Pate, Doug Dobson, and Lori Wallace were the
Oh,
judges.
nice. Yeah.
And so it's pretty diverse group, and I know they all listen a little bit differently. I'm sure Chris was railing on it, so
Get some volume behind it there. Yeah.
But again, it's 2 versus 3, and just
Right.
tune versus tune, not an actual score against it or anything. Which I think at that point is the most practical and fairest way to do it, because it's like, hey, it's not necessarily yeah, we're going for kind of a competition. It's like, hey, am I daily driving this or is it competition? At that point, we're leaning towards competition.
Right. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like better is better. So
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, and to clarify for anybody listening to this that may not be aware, it's limited to 90 minutes as far as doing the tune. Essentially, once you've set up, you can bring whatever gear you want, whatever else. You can't automate it. You can't just transpose stuff from RU into the processor, or you can't run like if you're running JL audio amps, you can't just go from the max directly into it. Like that kind of is a shortcut for some that may not be for others, depending on how they tune. So we make sure everything's manually put into the DSP. But as long as you manually put everything from the DSP, you got 90 minutes to do whatever you want, however you want to do it. So obviously, for some who do this professionally, who might be able to spend a day doing a tune, they might be able to get further than anybody else. But for a 90-minute tune, bring what you brought and see what happens.
Yeah, I mean it's nobody's best work by any means because of the time crunch and sometimes the limitation of whatever the vehicle has and stuff like that. But it's always a super fun exercise to see who can do what with this much time.
Yeah, and I think it really levels the playing field in that regard, right? Like, so
Yeah.
it's not in my opinion, it's not saying that, oh, well, if you're a professional tuner and you don't get first place here, then you're not worth your hill of beans. Like, that's not the case at all, because I mean, it's a different process. This is just really, it's a fun exercise to see what you can do in 90 minutes. Like, that's all it is.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not discrediting, not discrediting anybody who's involved, but also if your livelihood depends on 90-minute tunes, then this should be pretty good for you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, man, that's cool. Do any of these people do they already know the outcome or not?
Nope. This is first time we said it. So basically, what I'm going to do is just tell people what their color is and say listen to the podcast. So
that's awesome, man.
But anyway, that's all I've got. Like I said, we've got Aggieland the next the Aggie coming up September 20. So that will be kind of have to be capped with some of it. I know IASCA will not have to be capped because they can kind of use multiple judges and be able to kind of diversify that. I know with MCA we're probably going to be like 24 to 28 cars since it's a 1 day event. So
yeah,
24 cars in 1 day is essentially identical to what we did at Aggieland in 1 day.
Yeah.
This year, but we can probably stretch that into 28 since again we do that on the regular on 1 day and Saturday.
One last group. Yeah.
But yeah, so I know we're at, if everybody shows up that's in right now, basically announced the event yesterday around noon, and as of this afternoon we're at 20 cars.
Golly.
For that Aggie Light. So we're pretty close to cap already. But I mean, like I said, I think we can get more IASCA cars, mass cars. Again, I think there's going to be 2 judges there, so they could probably get a little bit more. And of course, then for Emma and MCA, 24 to 28 cars is probably our max. And also, I will announce here too for the MCA Cup. For those who may or may not be familiar with the cups for ECA and WCA. So like for ECA, they have the Michael Silverman Cup. For the MCA Cup, we're doing the same thing. It's a perpetual cup, similar to others, where the winner gets their plaque on the cup, and it's memorialized, to one person. So for this one, I actually spoke to his wife this morning, and David Seal. It's going to be the David Seal Cup.
Nice.
David Seal was heavily involved in Texas for many years. He was on Team Hybrids back in the day. He was one of the first team members I met. He was always a diehard competitor. He won one of the cups at the Parkinson's research event in Georgia a few years back. He passed away around 2 years ago, mid-build on another team member's car, and along with campaign, he had a Shelby F-150 that he competed with for several years, and he was working on that blue Buick. Now that blue Buick is actually owned by Mario Rodriguez in Mexico, so
cool.
he's continuing to work on that build. But yeah, so whoever wins the event, the Aggie Light event at MTI September 20 for the MCA finals, their name will get on the cup. They'll have that cup for a year, and then we'll do the same thing next year, somewhere, someplace, sometime, and then it'll go on from there for the David Seal Cup. So
yeah, the WCA Cup is John Fisher.
John Fisher, okay.
Yeah,
I couldn't. I didn't want to say the wrong name, but yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, I actually competed against him a couple years back, 2012, 2013 finals. I know 2012 for sure because we had the West Coast, East Coast thing going on for IASCA that year. Yeah. So he competed IASCA Pro-Am on the West Coast in Redding, California that year, and then I competed the East Coast finals in Indianapolis that year, and we were both in IASCA Pro-Am, and so I ended up winning the East Coast finals, but then he beat me on the overall, so he got the championship.
Oh yeah.
Same thing happened to me in the next year in 2013, only an expert, so I was competing against Brian Mitchell. Brian Mitchell, that was the year that he did his the zombie build.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So he competed both. So he competed the West Coast finals with the cruise in factory format. It was just, a cruise. And then he did the zombie build in between in like a week and a half.
That's crazy.
And then competed the same car only with the zombie build at East Coast finals, a week and a half or so later. So he back then, so if you competed in both, it was kind of a rigged, in my opinion, because if you competed in both, they just took your highest score.
Oh, lame!
Right? So I was like, how do you
tries?
Exactly. How do you come out on that? And West Coast finals, it was I forget the name of the shop now, but anyway, it was in Portland somewhere, I think. And so he was judged like outside in basically park setting, like it was like 50 dB outside and perfect weather and quiet and everything else, and then a week and a half later or whatever, I'm judged in that hall in Alabama, in the SPL hall, with infinite baffle mid bases and everything else, sitting on that concrete floor with who knows how loud it was out, in that building, and it was stuffy and everything else. And I was like, well, I'm not going to come out ahead here, and I didn't.
Yeah, the top of the hour, every SPL vehicle turned on, for 30 minutes or so.
Between 2012 finals in Indy and then 2013 finals, having the SPL hall combined, like I think we all lost a lot of brain cells to carbon monoxide poisoning.
That was a crazy finals. Chris, we competed at that one. That was the first finals that I competed at, was the 2013 finals.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, because actually, I exactly remember that, because then Chris was like, "Man, those hybrid guys didn't even talk to us."
Chris got second to John Fisher at that finals.
Oh, so he got second. Okay.
Yeah. Chris got second, and it was in Mecca. I think modified class.
Okay, yeah, we weren't competing in Mecca back then.
Yeah, and Chris got second, and
awesome.
John got first. Yep, it was a pretty close one too, but he edged him out.
That's cool. Yeah, John was actually, I guess he was actually at that event, wasn't he? There,
yeah,
in Alabama. Yeah, he made the trip that year. Cool, awesome. Well, unless you got anything else, I think I'm Aggie landed out.
All right, until next year.
Time for time to prep for SVR, I guess, and then the other 15 events that you got in between. So
yeah, busy this year. That's it's good though. I like doing it. So
that's good.
I got to go to California a couple times. I got let's see, our Brian's SQ thing at Brian's. that
Oh, yeah,
Brian's
let's
not
keep
going to
bashing
be at.
Brian without Brian. No Brian.
Yeah,
Let's keep
Brian's going
bashing
to be
Brian's without Brian.
yeah, Brian's going to be a kicker, which it looks like it's going to be a pretty cool show.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good one.
It's a shame they're both on the same day, but that's just how it works sometimes. But
Yeah.
So I'll be at that one, and then I've got before that we've got the Pitch and Forge show, and then I go to California, and then I got SVR. I've got to do the CSS show up in Cincinnati.
Oh yeah, okay.
ECA finals, MCA finals, WCA finals. So.
all the CAs.
Yeah. Collect the whole set. I think I get
collect them all.
I think I unlock an achievement after that. So
yeah, get you a plush toy or something. Sounds good, man. Well, I appreciate you. We'll talk soon.
All right, man. Take it easy.